Welcome to Enroute, the podcast of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. The First Responder Behavioral Health Institute is bringing together some of the most inspiring and dedicated change agents in the global public safety, psychotherapy, and educational communities. Each episode of Enroute seeks to bring together first responder change agents and clinicians dedicated to constructively disrupting the status quo by tackling the tough subjects like first responder suicide, post-traumatic stress, moral injury, sanctuary trauma, leadership development, critical incident response, peer support teams, and what it means to be psychologically safe and healthy while working in an unsafe world. All units, please stand by. The Enroute podcast is about to begin. You can resume normal traffic on this channel after this transmission. Welcome to this edition of Enroute. I'm Joseph Brigandi. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Daniel Sundahl, firefighter paramedic, award-winning artist, and mental health advocate. In the first responder world, if you don't know him by name, you most certainly know him by his artwork and images. Daniel talks with us about the therapeutic process, his journey towards post-traumatic growth, art as a part of the healing process, and his annual peer support recovery and resilience symposium in Canada. Daniel Sundahl, welcome to this episode of Enroute. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. Your work is well known. And your contributions to the community are greatly appreciated. For the three people in the EMS world who don't know who you are and what you do, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Dan Sundahl. I create artwork under the name Dan Sun Photo Art. And I was a paramedic firefighter for 20 years full time. And 2014, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And part of my therapy at that time was to process the emotions and the feelings I was having through artwork, because I was dabbling in that type of photography before. And my therapist said, maybe you can process that by recreating it. At the time, I thought it was a horrible idea, but I did it and I started creating the artwork. And what I didn't realize was that many of my peers would look at the images and create their own experiences or attach their own experiences to it. And then everything kind of really blew up from there. And that was, almost 10 years ago now. So now I'm retired. I'm back in school learning to become a counseling therapist. And everything's pretty good. Pretty happy.
Nice. Your images have moved me and so many of my clients as well. So it's nice to hear that it was a therapeutic release for you. And now you pretty much do it all over the world. So how many places have you gone to do your photo shoots now?
Yeah, I've been all across Canada, the United States, England, Finland, Guatemala, Europe. So all over Australia, been there a few times. So yeah, I've been there quite a bit. I've been all over the place. So I'm really lucky that I get to travel, exhibit my artwork. I have a large format exhibit that I travel with, and I speak on post-traumatic growth, and talk about my artwork and express what happened to me in my own words and my own story. So yeah, I'm very lucky that I'm able to do that.
Yeah. Now, when you originally used your art as a therapeutic modality, did you think that it would ever be so well received, or did you even have an eye on publishing any of it? Was it just for personal work?
No, none of it. The exact opposite. The first couple images that I created, I thought, no, there's no way I'm going to share this with anybody, because it was, and this is back in 2014. So where I'm from, we didn't really talk a lot about mental health in the emergency services community where I am. And the first images were two paramedics in the back of the ambulance doing CPR on a patient. And it's based on a call that I did. His spirit is above his body. And the second part of that image is the patient died. The paramedic is sitting in the CPR seat, and he has gloved hands on his head. He's distraught. And then the spirit of the patient is sitting in the airway seat. looking at the paramedic with this angry, kind of disappointed look on his face. So there's weird ghosts in there. The paramedic has gloved hands on his head, and he's in this distraught state. So no, I didn't plan on sharing that with anybody because it really portrayed us as being, portrayed as being real. But at the time, it was not. I assumed it wouldn't be a very popular image, and that I would get really kind of crucified for sharing that in the community. So I didn't share that one for months and months and months, and I kept creating images for my own therapy because it was a way for me to purge and process the images and trap them into these two-dimensional pictures. But when I did start sharing them, just because I thought they were kind of cartoony looking and kind of cool looking, I was expecting lots of negative feedback, but the exact opposite happened, which was wonderful.
Yeah. Your images have shown us in our most vulnerable moments, and in that vulnerability and extreme strength has come through. I think it's been an essential part of your healing process. And what was it like when the first people started seeing your images and you started getting feedback that was positive? Did that change things for you?
Yeah, I thought my phone was broken when I first posted those images because my phone just kept buzzing and buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. And I thought it was broken. I had to turn it off. I was actually at work, and I just started a shift, and we were doing our morning meeting, and it was really distracting. So I actually had to turn my phone off. So yeah, it really went viral. Like it really blew up. And it was a bit surprising for sure, because I thought the opposite would happen. And I think what the connection is, because all the images I create, they're for me. They're based on my own experiences, and it's how I purge them. But because, like you said, they're authentic, and they have to be authentic for me in order for the therapeutic process to happen. So I don't censor when I create the artwork. I don't think, okay, what are people going to think? Are people going to be offended? Are people going to like it? I don't think that at all. I think, okay, what does this mean to me? And I create it. And as I'm creating it, I'm trying to recreate how I feel. But I have to be true to myself in order for that therapeutic process to happen. And I think that's why many of my peers connect to it, because they recognize that authenticity to it, and that I'm not, an artist just creating first responder artwork. It really has a story behind it. And everyone that looks at it will have a different story because their experiences will be a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of experiences, let me take you back to that day, that moment when you had to come to terms with a professional that there was a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress. What was the impact like?
I was shocked. I was surprised because I didn't know that I had post-traumatic stress disorder, which was the official diagnosis. And I didn't realize that that was the cause of the symptoms I was having, because I always thought that diagnosis with post-traumatic stress was you're normal, and then you have that one event. And then after that one event, then essentially you're impaired after that event. And that's how I thought it worked. And I never really had that one event that really, like, okay, I'm different after that call. It was many years of lots of events that eventually started to creep up on me. And the only way that I knew that something was wrong was when our crew had to go listen to this psychologist talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. And we all had to go the entire city. And when I think about it now, in retrospect, I was pretty forward thinking for the city to do that. And as he was doing his lecture for us and describing a lot of the signs and symptoms of trauma, I recognized a lot of those symptoms in myself. And that's what encouraged me to go, hey, maybe I need to go get checked. And when I got checked, they're like, hey, yeah, Dan, you got PTSD. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, you mean if I kill myself, I'm not going to be okay? Like that. And that's where my mind was at the time. No, I was suicidal, but the thought process was, okay, I just don't want to feel anything anymore. I don't want to die. I don't want to feel anything anymore. So I'll kill myself and then I'll be okay. Like that's how messed up my brain was. And that's how messed up the neural pathways were. And that's how messed up the chemistry got in my brain after years and years and years of exposure. And I didn't even know, right? And that's what really is scary, that I probably would have taken my own life with that altered mindset, which is really scary. So for me, it wasn't like I think most people think how that diagnosis works.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress. What are some of the signs and symptoms that you have experienced yourself, and also the signs and symptoms that you've learned and are continuing to learn in your journey towards being a counselor?
Yeah, it's great going to school and learning this stuff. I'm analyzing myself. So it's like, oh, that's what was going on with me. Oh, that's what was happening to me. It's really interesting. But yeah, for me, it was, well, there's a lot, sleep disturbances, easy to anger, like really short fuse. I became very isolated, didn't want to associate with anybody. And I felt like I didn't really want to be around people. I started to feel like I didn't like people anymore. Like the joy level and the vitality level in my life just slowly started to decrease to the point where I just wanted to be by myself, which of course caused me a lot of problems at home and caused me a lot of problems at work because I would get angry, and I'd get angry really, really quick. When things got really bad, I started to hallucinate. Audibly, I would have audible and visual hallucinations. And severe depression, anxiety, and having all these symptoms, I would think that they were okay. I would think, okay, well, I'm just going to feel better tomorrow. Really bad disassociation. So my body was trying to run away from itself. Kind of my mind was trying to separate itself from me. It's like, hey, let's get the hell out of here. Yeah. And meaning what I mean by that is I would be in the back of the ambulance with a patient, and I would feel like I was doing a ride along with myself. Like I wouldn't be present as a paramedic, which I realized and recognized that could start to be dangerous for my patients. And it was a lot of, and now that I'm learning the things I'm learning in school, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I had. And I've learned that these are all common traits of trauma and how it happens, through the neurology of the brain and how those pathways develop. And so that's very interesting, but I don't think my symptoms were any different than anyone else's. But I think for me, I didn't recognize them as being symptoms of trauma, which is kind of the scary part.
Absolutely. Well, and now that you're gaining the professional knowledge and going through that journey yourself, you're starting to come to clarity on that. And I'm so glad that you spoke a little bit on traumatic-related disassociation. One of the things that I thought I would do when I transitioned from being a first responder into a clinical mental health professional is the power of my why and my reason was to truly get to the bottom of first responder suicide. And I thought the way to do that was to become an expert in and understand post-traumatic stress injury, post-traumatic stress disorder. And then I met a guy who is on the faculty of the Institute named Roger Solomon, who's a world-renowned expert in traumatic-related disassociation. So I started to realize very quickly that what we have going on here is that PTSD and PTSI is a plateau, and the higher peak and the pinnacle of the disturbance is actually traumatic-related disassociation. It's when we pull away. It's when we're in the third person. It's when we can and can't recall the event. And I see it when I do my debriefings. I'll come in the next day and they're getting off a shift from a pediatric drowning or something. And they'll go, hey, Joseph, well, why are you here? And I'm like, well, I'm here because they called me up because you guys took a really tough call first part of the shift. And one of the medics will say, no, that was 3 or 4 shifts ago. And his partner will go, dude, 7 a.m. yesterday morning, we were making breakfast. And he's pushed it. It's still there in resident memory for me. And we can still recall it and process it. But he has to be cued. He's disassociated from the experience. And that's a part of what you're talking about. And then I went on to study traumatic-related disassociation and to try to develop an expertise in that. Tell us more about those experiences, if you have anything to offer in terms of that recovery process and reassociating some of those memories. And then I want to go ahead and talk about a subject that you have helped to truly give us, and one of my favorite words and it should be in the DSM, post-traumatic growth.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, for the disassociation, me and my partner would actually joke about this on the ambulance, is that we did 24-hour shifts where I worked. And halfway through our shift, if we're having like a really busy day, we would sit and we would think, what was the first call we did today? And we couldn't remember the first call we did that day, like 12 hours earlier. And when I think about it, it's like that was, when we recall it, it's like, well, that was a pretty significant event for our patient, yet we just forget it. And yeah, I think in a way that helped us get through the rest of our shift, because if we're dwelling on that first call, but unfortunately when we went home, it kind of stayed that way, and it started to bleed into other parts of my life anyways, where I would recognize my environment, but it wouldn't seem familiar to me. So things seemed less familiar to me, even though there were places I've been, or like even parts of my house. So it's a really interesting pathology that happens where the mind is trying to protect itself. And for me, what actually I think what helped me is I removed those traumatic experiences from coming in, meaning that I had to leave the service. Wasn't my choice. My psychologist said, hey, Dan, because I was actually diagnosed twice, so 2014. And then I did the R work, which really helped. But then it started coming back because I was re-traumatizing myself all the time, even though I kind of had a good handle on it, and recognized and had a good tool belt what to do. I was still being exposed to that trauma.
Yeah.
And so now I'm not being exposed to that trauma all the time. So I'm feeling way better than I was. And again, that's after like 20 years so I think I just had I had a pretty good career, and I don't regret it at all. But now, because of the therapy that I've done, and because of the artwork that I've done, and because I have remapped new neural pathways through therapy, which isn't super easy, I have a different brain than I did before. I have a different mind, and I've kind of reworked it. And now I'm a different and better person than I was before I started experiencing trauma.
Yeah.
And that's what post-traumatic growth is that I am experiencing things now that I never would have experienced if I didn't go through that process. So if I had a choice to go back, and they're like, hey, Dan, if you can go back 20 years and not become a paramedic and not be traumatized, would you do it? And I would say, no, I'll do it all over again. I would do it all over again, 100%. Because it didn't disappoint. The reason I wanted to become a paramedic and a firefighter is I wanted to live life to the fullest. And that's certainly what happened. I saw life on the edge, but you fly too close to the sun, you might get burned. And that's what happened. So I don't regret it. I encourage anyone that wants to get in the field to do it, because it is an amazing career that you will experience amazing things. So if I could go back, I'll do it all over again. And I wouldn't be on your show today if I didn't experience that trauma and create that artwork. So it's really given me a lot of opportunities. And when I exhibit my artwork, that's the main focus of my presentations are post-traumatic growth. Because I also think it's a very hopeful message for maybe people that are kind of really in the depths of stuff, that are like, how am I going to get out of this pit? And they can see people like me. And I know so many people, so many of our peers that have done the same thing. They've worked through it and built new neural pathways, and now are doing amazing things because of that trauma. So it's possible, and I think that's an important message for people to see.
I think it's a very important message, and I'm really glad you stated that, because it's the same truth for me. I would do it all over again. I've been at it 35 years. I would do it again. I tell people that are active duty working in the field, this is the most alive you may ever feel. It is a deep contribution to be there in somebody's hour of need, and to be able to, be a force and a support for them is a special, special gift. And to honor that time, but also to look at your career and your life as a path, what it comes next. For me, it was becoming a teacher, a training officer, and to give back and start teaching the paramedic program. And then I decided, you know what? I did poorly in school in the elementary and middle high school years. But then all of a sudden I realized, hey, teaching is a gift and I have a gift for it. And then I asked myself, okay, what is a real educator? And went off and got the degrees and became a professional educator, and gave back even more, and grew even more as a part of that. And that's not the end of that. Then I went back and got the master's in clinical counseling and mental health, and then got the specializations in post-traumatic stress and traumatic-related dissociation, EMDR as well. And all of this I thought was leading me away from the first responder community and leading me into another path. Never in my wildest dreams did I feel that I would be on the other end of this as a consultant to police and fire departments, that I would be talking to them about pathways to get their members the health they need, to educating them that a post-traumatic stress diagnosis does not have to be a career ender, especially if you guys can normalize, smash stigma, make services available, and help our members in the earlier phases so that they're not sitting with this for 15, 20, 25 years before they seek help. And to have people on my caseload who are our own members. I never realized that most of my caseload is police officers, firefighter, paramedics. I have 3 psychiatrists, so they take the medicine that they prescribe, a couple of emergency room physicians. And I am not ashamed to acknowledge or admit that I myself am on someone's caseload, that the Counseling Center of Texas would not have grown to become the agency it is and to spin off the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute if I didn't have one of the most brilliant psychotherapists out there guiding me, helping me through my own process of recovery. Because I still go out and do debriefings, I have him on speed dial if one of those debriefings starts to become a little too stimulating, and he's there for me. So I am a product of the process that I speak of. I'm not above it. I'm always concerned when we interview young therapists and I ask them if they've experienced therapy themselves, and they say, no, I'm here to help people.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how there's that stigma toward that. Yet in the fire department, you know, no one says, oh, you need to get your yearly physical. Every 2 years you need to get the physical. It's like, okay, well, I'll just go get it done. No one's like, oh, he's got to go get a physical done. Oh, he's got to do his yearly physical. Yeah, something's wrong with him. Like, why is that okay? That, hey, I just need to get a yearly mental health checkup. You know, even if, like, what's wrong with that? But for some reason, if you go with them, you're broken. Something's wrong with you. Right? It's weird. Yeah. It's weird that the mental and the physical is so viewed so differently.
You know, it is, but I've decided that this is an educational problem. And this is one of the other reasons that went into the creating of the Institute. Being a paramedic instructor and looking at those manuals and having taught from them, there's not one single page in those books about how to take care of yourself. Not one.
Yeah, I think for me, there was a couple lines, Joseph, a couple lines that said, kind of boiled down to, you might see stuff, but suck it up, buttercup, was kind of like the 2 lines of taking care of yourself, right? 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I started. But yeah, it's weird. Things are changing for the good.
They are. And that's where voices like ours are adding to the shift in the paradigm. Even our registered nurses, at least in the United States curriculums, they get 1 nutrition class and 1 psychology class, and that's it. And that's starting to change for them as well. But as we go ahead and we look at changing the paradigm, one of the things we have to do is educate the leadership. For me, all of your images strike a chord. And a lot of people know you and they don't know you. And it works out like this in the therapeutic suite. I use your books very sparingly, but very purposely. So I'll get someone into 6 or 10 weeks of therapy, and we're working through things. And at the time when they're feeling most alone, this is happening to me and me alone, then I'll ask, do you know Daniel Sundahl and his work? And they'll usually say, I don't know the name. And I'll pull one of your books out, and then immediately they recognize those images. Mm-hmm. And I will go ahead and share one of them with them. I have a couple of, I think your volume 1 is got wrinkled pages for the first responders who have cried all over those images. They realize in that, I'm not alone here.
Yeah, that makes me feel great because, like I said, those books are they're my own. Like, that's a look inside my mind. So when I hear that others connect to it, then that means that they're connecting to me, just like they feel when they look at my artwork that I'm connecting to them. It's a two-way street. So when I hear that, it's, that really fills my heart. That makes me feel great. And, I love that, when I travel and I go to conferences and people will bring one of my books and they want me to sign it. And it's like, it's well read, like, and they apologize. I'm like, look, I'm sorry. It's not the best. I'm like, no, this is great. Like, I love that this book has clearly been well used. I think this is wonderful. Like, I think it's great that it's been so well read. So I love to see that type of stuff happen. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's special to see the change in their energy, and they shift in posture after about the 6th image, and they're empowered. They recognize, okay, this has not just happened to me and me alone. And it does support them in their growth. How many books are you on now? I know I have 1, 2, and I think 3, but where are you at?
I just released book 4.
Okay.
So the pre-sales for my book 4 are out now, and the pre-sales are numbered and hand-signed, and they'll print with a signed Leicester paper print of the cover. So that's going to be, I should be getting those from the printer in November. So the pre-sales are available now on my website, and then when I actually get the books from the printer, then we'll open up the regular sales for that. So yeah, it's very exciting. Very proud of the 4th book. And it's very similar to the other books. It's just every few years I create enough artwork to build a new book. And in my books, they have anything that's in orange. Those are comments from people that have seen my artwork. So it's just not me. I write the narrative in white, but then I include what other people have commented on it, which really kind of takes home the, we're not alone. Like, this is why I created the image, but then this is how other people have seen it. So when you read the book, you get my intake, you get my input, you get the input of other people that have seen it. And then you can really feel that you're not alone. And that's kind of why I did that, is included other people's comments on it when I first published the images.
Nice. Let's go ahead and take them to your website. Let's see if we can do that right here, and show them a little bit of that, if my system cooperates with me. Okay. So you've got your gallery here and broken down into the various disciplines of service. By the way, I think I saw on the internet the other day you're doing a series of prints for the RCMP. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, that was great. I just was at the photo lab and was hand signing the frame prints. Oh, that turned out great. And that one that I shared with the RCMP officer, with this phoenix growing out of essentially a female officer, and I created that one specifically for them. It's going to go into their tactical operations center, and that's the first time I saw that one, and actually on print and canvas and frame. I'm like, oh man, this looks great. I'm going to get a copy of it myself to put in my own gallery, because it turned out really, really, really good. But that is wonderful, because that's from, the officer in command commissioned those art pieces, and he's going to put them up there. And I think that's great, because that's really showing buy-in from the organization. And the images that they picked some of them are pretty, the message really is stress, resiliency, recovery is really what the themes were of the images that they picked. So it's, I was really happy to hear from them that they wanted to do that. Very proud to have my artwork up in their facility.
Absolutely. And it's just beautiful work too. And by the way, I did order my advanced copy of the 4th. Oh,
you did?
Your 4th book.
Okay, good.
I sure did.
Yeah. I thought I saw your name in there.
I'm looking forward to it. I also want to let people know that you do an annual symposium, which I wanted to go to, but we were struggling to get the Institute launched and to get a dozen episodes of our podcast done. I wasn't afraid we couldn't get it done. So regrettably, we're not going to be able to attend this year, but it sounds like you're on your third, if I'm correct. And
Yep.
Tell us about this symposium, what you're doing there and what's up.
Yeah. So the symposium that we're doing, like I mentioned before, I'm lucky I get to travel around the world and meet many of our peers. And I recognize these symptoms of post-traumatic growth in many of the people that I meet. And I invite them to come and speak about their experiences of post-traumatic growth at this conference. So the majority of them aren't professional speakers. They just come and they share their story of what happened to them, and they share how they got better, what methods they used, and how their life is better because of those experiences. And it's a really powerful, it's just a one-day symposium. We do a networking thing the night before. But yeah, it's I'm very excited. I have a great lineup this year. Too bad you're going to miss it. It's really, I've got some amazing speakers this year. And yeah, it's a wonderful event. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be gret. And yeah, we're sold out. So we sold out pretty quick. And I think next year, actually, we formed a nonprofit organization, a foundation, and we just applied for charitable status. So next year we'll be doing it under our foundation, which will be the Recovery and Resiliency Foundation. And we'll be running it through that nonprofit next year.
Congratulations on the events, on growing those events, on getting our community together to go ahead and increase their voice. You're a force multiplier in this space and in this platform. And by bringing us all together, you're doing an enormous amount of good for us all. And I'm sorry as well we couldn't make it. We did sponsor, and we
did. Thank you very much.
You better believe it. It's our honor to do so. And we do plan to come visit you next year. So we've already put it in the calendar. So we're looking forward to it.
Great, Joseph, of the sponsorship. I have sponsorships all around the world, which is really wonderful. I have several, although it's a Canadian event this year, I have several sponsors from the United States. We have sponsorship from Australia. So it's great that there's international support. Now, most of the people that will be coming to the event are going to be Canadian or Western Canadian emergency workers, but I think several are traveling internationally to come. But it's great to see that organizations from all around the world really want to support the people that are coming and to support this event. I think that really fills my heart to see that there's so many organizations not local to where I am that really want to help out people not even in their own area. I think that's wonderful. Yeah. Really sense of global community, which is one of our mandates for our foundation. So I love that.
Good. So speaking of the global community and for travel, tell us a little bit about your background in that area. I heard a rumor that you were somehow in a blues band in Japan. What's that about?
Yes, I was. I know that's a weird story. Yeah, early on in my life, this is before my time as an emergency worker. Early in my life, I had this sense that I really wanted to live a full life and really experience as much as I can. So I started traveling pretty early, and I lived in 6 different countries, and it really kind of broadened my horizons, and I met a lot of people. And yeah, I lived in Japan, and while I was in Japan, I worked in a ski resort in the kitchen, and I also played guitar there, and I played in a Japanese blues band, and I really stuck out like a sore thumb in this band. It was, but what an amazing experience it was for me. I loved it, and I almost didn't leave Japan. I loved it there. I almost wanted to stay there forever. It was great. Yeah,
Understood.
Great, wonderful experience.
So, what are some of your musical influences in any genre? Who do you listen to?
I have a pretty eclectic musical taste. I like when I'm doing my artwork, I listen to classical music when I'm creating artwork. But I really like Yeba. I think she's great. Hope that she comes out with another album soon. A lot of the people I really like are from Texas. Krungbin, that's a really cool band. So there's a lot of great music coming out of what's the Lamar Trio? I think they're out of Texas there. Yeah, some really cool music coming out of there. But yeah, I have a pretty wide range of music that I like. I really like jazz guitar, classical guitar. That's my training. And yeah, I listen to music quite a bit. But one thing I did realize as part of when I do my presentation on what I did to get better and what I continue to do to get better is one of the things I recognized in myself was that I had to process the emotions that I was having. And when I was trying to recover and I would listen to like really slow, sappy, sucky music, it made things worse because it almost got me too far into it. Like I'd listen to this music and it just kind of made me, okay, I'm processing, I'm feeling the emotions. But then it was like, then I started going a little bit too deep. So one of the things in my presentation I say, and again, I'm not saying that people should do this. This is just what I did, is I recognize that, if I'm feeling low or have a bad day, I don't listen to slow, sappy music that day because it's just going to put me in deeper. But yeah, it's kind of, I know music. I listen to music all the time. Love it. I got speakers all over my house, even in my shower, music everywhere.
Nice. Well, we're glad you like Texas, and we're glad you like Texas music. You've been here a few times to a few public safety agencies. We're hoping to have you back. Your presentation is well regarded, and it is known throughout the industry to help create change and to help educate. And you also have a resiliency course that you're put together and are getting ready to go ahead and put out there, both on your own and with the Institute. Tell us a little bit more about that program and how it came together and what it is you hope to teach in the world of resilience.
Yeah, well, with the help of the Institute, they helped me put together the 3-hour, well, it could be expandable. Right now it's a 3-hour workshop, but it could be expandable to a half day or a full day. And it's really great. I'm really proud of it. Of course, it includes a lot of my artwork, but we go through a lot of, what resiliency means, what recovery means. We go through a lot of exercises in the workshop that people can go through themselves. And there's a lot of discussion. So it's not really a lecture where I'm just a talking head gabbing about stuff. It's really an interactive piece that is really wonderful to go through. So yeah, it's again, with the help, it got developed through the Institute, and I'm really proud of it. And I kind of came up with the idea of like, this is what I like to talk about. And then people that are much smarter than me and people with lots of letters behind their name helped me put together the curriculum of what I really wanted to portray in a really productive and wonderful way.
So our next track was a behavioral health clinical responder track, because I came to learn very quickly when I tried to get other therapists to help us in the middle of crisis response team work that they were scared to do it. I didn't have the clinical competency and the cultural awareness and capacity. So there was none of that included in their training either. So we have a similar program for them. If they hang out with us for a couple of years, take a couple of dozen classes, they can take the comprehensive examination and become a behavioral health clinical responder, so that we can give them the clinical competency that's required to go ahead and add value. We're not a certificate program. So behavioral health first responder or behavioral health clinical responder, and you don't have to sign up for either one of those clinical pathways. You can take any course pretty much on our platform. There's a couple of courses that are restricted for law enforcement and other groups, but most of it is available for people to take. And check us out and see what we offer and what the caliber of our educational offerings are. It's our hope that you'll get hooked, that you'll feel that we are offering value, that our instructors are what you're hoping for, and people that you can learn from. I've done my best to bring some of the world's best change agents and some of the brightest minds around the world in the area of first responder behavioral health to the platform. So hopefully they're going to add value to you and your ongoing effort to bring cultural change and awareness to the first responder community. I'm reminded by, there's so many of your images that I absolutely love. And one of them that sticks out to me, and I've often used it when I'm trying to talk to leadership about sanctuary trauma and moral injury, is an image that you have done of a firefighter who is sitting on the ground holding a can that says PTS. There is a chief over him who is pouring gasoline on this firefighter. And the chief is blindfolded, for he sees not what he's doing. And it's such a compelling image for me. But it also speaks to one of the biggest challenges and elephants in the room. We educate in how to take care of yourself as a first responder, how to take care of the public as a first responder or clinical responder, and then the tough one, how to take care of the organization. Organizational development and leadership development is a psychological discipline. It's often overlooked. Tell us about the thoughts, the energy behind that specific image, and your thoughts on sanctuary trauma and moral injury.
Yeah, well, gosh, Joseph, we can do a whole separate podcast on that topic, I think.
Okay, I'll gladly have you back. Thank you.
Yeah,
You're in season
I
2
could,
for that.
Right, I could talk about that because there's so many aspects to that and so many cogs in that machine that I think a lot of people don't realize the effects of that, and really how it can be mitigated, because I think those are all controllable stress factors. There's many non-controllable stresses in our work. We know that we're going to be called to these scenes that are going to be tough. We knew that even before we decided to get into this profession. But, we didn't know that, when we go to those calls and we come back to our stations, that we're going to experience more trauma. So sanctuary trauma is when you are experiencing trauma and then you go to a place that you think is going to be sanctuary, or you're going to receive support, you receive more trauma when you're already experiencing the primary trauma. And it's something I see a lot in our industry, and it happened to me with my service. And when I came up with the idea of that image, because I really did believe that my department was doing the best that it thought it could, and it just really wasn't aware of the damage it was causing. And that's why I created that image with the blindfold of the officer. And when the image popped into my head of how I'm going to portray that, because when I create the images, the idea, the concept is there, and then I just kind of meditate on it or think on it, and then an image pops into my head of how I can best portray that complex idea. So this image popped in my head of this firefighter holding a candle that's on fire and this officer pouring gas. I'm like, oh man, that's heavy. Like, where did that come from? So I thought, but that really portrays the idea of sanctuary trauma, where, the officer doesn't really know the damage that they're causing. And when I thought of it, I'm like, who am I going to get to help with this? Like, what organization is going to, because all my images are photo based. I start with a photo and then I digitally draw and paint how I feel on top of that photo. But yeah, there was a fire department that was close by where I live that's very supportive of my work. I told them about the concept and like, yep, we're all over it. And so I used the actual officers and actual firefighters for that. And so I'm really grateful that they let me do that. But yeah, it's a pretty, when I did post that, I got a lot of negative feedback from a lot of organizations that I worked with, from the leadership teams that are like, hey, Dan, I thought we were on the same side. Like, what is this? Lighting our firefighters on fire like that is like, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, that's like, read what I wrote. Like, don't just look at the picture. There's a meaning behind it. And, I think if anyone should be reading it, it should be you, right? Like take a look at it and read all the comments. Like when I posted that, I think hundreds and hundreds of people commented on it, on how they really connect to that. So yeah, I think sanctuary trauma is something that is one of those traumatic experiences that we can really control and lessen through education through the organization, and how to, I don't know if trauma-informed is a really good word, but developing a trauma-informed work environment where they can be more aware of the people in the organization and the experiences that they have. And yeah, you might have to, treat them a little bit, I don't want to say treat different, but you might have to, tweak your organization to best support them, to keep them more productive, to lower your sick time, to lower your staff turnover, and ultimately to lower suicide rates. And so I think that's a big part of it. I think we have this myopic view of, well, that firefighter died from suicide because of that, that burned family that he saw. But, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was, he went there and then he came back and he was stigmatized or wasn't supported. Could be lots of different things, lots of reasons. So I think the fact that we just assume that was the cause, it could be, this is another episode we could talk about, is the trauma they bring into the industry. Yeah. We talk about the ACE scores and stuff, that type of stuff. So that's a lot of things. But yeah, sanctuary trauma is another topic that I'm pretty passionate about, but not to be negative or against organizations at all. That's not what the purpose of that image was. It's to support really organizations, to help them be more supportive of the people that work for them or work in those fields.
Absolutely. And I often get a negative feedback when I mention these concepts as well. And I let them know, hey, I'm not here to start a revolution. I'm here to cause evolution. I'm here to work with the leadership. Organizational development and organizational psychology is an actual psychological discipline. Leadership development is something that is learned. Early in my career, I was promoted because I was a good paramedic, not a great leader. I have many times when I was a poor leader and I had to learn. With the benefit of a better education over the years and studying that discipline, I've become a better leader. Or the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute wouldn't exist. I'm not in charge of them. I take direction from the people I bring in. I bring people smarter than me into the room, and then I take a lot of notes, and I do my best to go ahead and align myself with those objectives to where we can go ahead and be effective. But, the truth in the clinical suite, when I'm working with our members, my index of suspicion of suicidality goes through the roof when I hear that they're having problems with the leadership. It's never the call. The call is an element and an aspect of what brought you in here. But if the psychology of the self, how things are going at home, how you take care of yourself psychology, isn't in a good place, and we've had a critical incident or 10, and we're going to our leadership for help, and we're experiencing sanctuary trauma and moral injury, the index of suspicion for suicidality, is heightened for me, and I'm very concerned about that member and tuning in and dialing in. We have to educate our leaders that post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder is treatable, especially in the early stages, and that many people can choose to return to work or stay on the job. And if not, transition programs that help them to go and grow. If a firefighter falls off a ladder and breaks their leg in 10 places, we have physical therapy, occupational therapy, and all sorts of recovery programs to help them either get back in or to transition them out in a way that is noble and in a way that is supportive. When it comes to psychology, people tend to run like hell, get extremely scared, and if they're going to make a mistake in leadership, it's going to be at that moment. I've had firefighters complete a complete course of treatment with me, and then go to the IAFF Center for Excellence, come back with glowing letters from them, glowing letters from me, have really done the work and be ready to return to work, only to have the department say, no, we don't want you back. And then they wonder why we have a suicide on our hands. It's one thing if you can't get those letters. I don't write those letters easily. You can't walk into my office and say, give me a letter. That's not happening. I'll walk you out. If you want to commit to the treatment, if you want to really do the work, and you're putting in the time and you're trying to grow, we're working together as a collaborative force. And whether it's returning to work or not, we're going to be successful in these outcomes. But sanctuary trauma, moral injury, and a very important topic. And you're right, we could do a whole episode on it. Perhaps we should. And I'm looking forward to doing deeper dives into that. But we can't fix the organization, or we can't help the member through their issues unless we help the organization to realize its role in it and the things that they can do to be supportive. And, your work and your discussions go a great way into smashing the stigma. And that's one of the things that most of our guests have in common is they're advocating for, a better workforce than the one they entered. And that's one of the things that, I love about you and your work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of risk factors, like the calls that would go on, the environment that we work in, but interpersonal relationships is a big deal. Before the show, I mentioned Dr. Olivia Johnson and the work that she's doing, and the fatal 10 that she's come up with. She's a suicidologist who could actually do an autopsy on suicides, and she's come up with the fatal 10, which are the 10 most common risk factors, I guess you can say, or 10 most common things that people that have died by suicide have in common. And the number one issue is interpersonal skills. Substance abuse and addiction is right up there. But I guess the argument could be that maybe they're having substance abuse and addiction problems and interpersonal relationship issues because of the work that they do, and maybe because of the experiences they have at work. But she has a list of 10 common factors. And I think I don't want to say it's wonderful. It sounds weird to say that, but these are 10 things that you can maybe recognize as a leader in an organization. You can look at these 10 fatal 10, she calls them, and see if you can recognize that in a lot of if you're like, there's signs. Like often we'll say that, this person died by suicide and we're so shocked and surprised. But I think if you really look closely, you might see that there's a lot of signs. There's a lot of warning flags there that, someone that was maybe more astute in seeing those things could have maybe stepped in and really saved that person. But I think the environment right now is, people die by suicide and it's thoughts and prayers, unless, well, that's horrible. It's too bad. Must have been because of that call they went on. Let's just move on. There's nothing we can do about it now. There's lots you can do about it. Really, like investigating, like what were the warning signs? Let's try to prevent this from happening again. Just like a physical injury. As a firefighter, if I fell through the floor in a fire, and broke my leg, that would really be investigated, right? It would be like, okay, well, how can we prevent it? Investigated not in a punitive way, but how of all the techniques that we have to be as safe as we possibly can, we'll go through that. Okay, what did you do? Did you do a right hand search? Did you do a left hand search? Did you feel the floor first? Like what are things that could have prevented this from happening, right? And that gets, God will investigate that to death. But when suicides happen, it's just, we don't really seem to see, okay, how could have this been preventative? We don't think, okay, well, it happened. There's nothing we can do about it. I think that's kind of the consensus right now. And I think that really has to change. Like you said, a paradigm shift, and it really needs to happen there. Lots of factors.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've never, ever, and I've regrettably been on so many first responder suicide calls, never, ever has a suicide just happened. Because I'm now surrounded by all of their colleagues and family members. So now I'm getting the story because he or she's no longer here. So yes, there was a problem at home. Yes, he was becoming angered, easily irritable. Yes, there was substance abuse going on. So basically, there were signs, there were symptoms. What there was not is a trained workforce and a trained community of peer support people who knew how to effectively address it and get the person help. So many agencies I work with don't even have peer support. And if they do, they don't have clinically directed peer support, which is something I'm trying to advocate for a lot now. So that it's one thing just to have members get together, and that's good. It's a good start. But do you have a place to take that member? Do you have 2 or 3 people in the clinical chain that you can get them to if things spin out of control?
I think that's really important. And I do a memorial portrait almost every day. So people will send me pictures of people in emergency services that, are active or retired that have died I don't know why they died. It doesn't matter, but I'll create a memorial portrait for them and put it on the page, and people can give the family support. But often some of the suicides that come in for that are peer support workers. And that's not something we really talk about. And people are so shocked, like, he was on our peer support team. But if you think about it, and a lot of the peer support teams, well, I imagine the majority of them they work in the service themselves. So they have their own experiences of trauma that they're dealing with, both, from work and environmental and home. And then they're exposing themselves or helping their peers with their traumas. So it's something that we don't, I've never really heard people talk about too much. It's about supporting, like peer support, because there are probably a larger amount of suicides than people realize from people that take on those roles as peer support members. And it happens a lot. Like just in my experiences, I see a lot of suicides for the more memorial portraits that I do from peer support team members. And that's something that I think we need to do some more work on, is peer support. Like, what extra work are you going to do? If you're going to come on our department and be our peer support team, okay, here's all the training to support others. And just like we mentioned before, how often does the topic come up? Okay, well, you have your own stuff to deal with. And how are we going to take care of you? Because now you're getting a double whammy, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We have a 4-day peer support training. We do a 2, 3, and a 4-day. When they'll let us do the 4th day, and sometimes budgetary restraints do get in the way, one of the things that we're doing is inviting the family of the peer support team and letting them know that you have a vote, you can call in. And it's signs and symptoms for you to look for in your own family member, because they are going above and beyond. I also advocate and recommend a minimum of 10% of the workforce be trained in peer support. So if you have 300 members, having 30 people that are trained in peer support, so that there's 10 people on per shift. Now I've got a scenario where I can rotate people off, give them a break, and we don't burn out the same 6 people all the time. Who are giving and then giving some more. But we need to grow peer support more now than ever. And I often have to tell peer support teams, if you're meeting in a bar, having beers, that's probably not as therapeutic as you might like to think so. But it's a start. No judgment. I just want to go ahead and grow the cultural competency. Another image you came out with, I think in the last couple of weeks, firefighter headed towards a candle. And you're talking about adverse childhood experiences.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about
to the flame.
I laughed, and my wife's also a therapist, and I said to her when I showed her that, I said, I think Daniel's at the point in his training where they're covering adverse childhood experiences in his coursework. What was behind that images, and tell us a little bit about ACE scores.
Yeah, actually, no, we haven't even talked about ACE scores in my training yet. But it's something I'm familiar with a lot of the people that I just travel with, right? So the people that I see and people I experience, and I have a lot of friends that are, getting PhDs all over the place that are studying. So whenever they are doing those things, and I'm always curious on what their research is. And one of them was doing a research on ACE scores, as far ACE quizzes and scores, and how it relates to emergency workers and if there's a correlation. And so I found that really interesting. And so the adverse childhood experiences is just a 10-question, for those of you that don't know, it's a 10-question quiz that you take, and you get a score of whatever out of 10. And could be pretty accurate as a future predictor of, addiction, of how susceptible you are to long-term trauma symptoms based on what experiences happened to you as a child. And so I found that really interesting. And I did do some research, and I didn't find anything conclusive, because I found 2 different studies that said 2 opposite things. And as far as if you have a high ACE score, so if you're an emergency worker who has a higher than, 5, 6, 7 ACE score, or lots of childhood traumatic experiences, then are you actually drawn to this industry of helping people? And I posted that, and a lot of the comments on that post were interesting, what people's takes were on that, because I asked the question, do you think if you have a high ACE score, do you feel that because of that, you are drawn to help people to be in this industry? Which is kind of like a bit of a negative, like a moth to the flame, which is what the picture was. It was a firefighter with these moths flying, and he's next to this candle being brought into this flame. Because we have those of us that have high ACE scores, we possibly are more susceptible to long-term trauma. So we're exposing ourselves to trauma. And we bring in a high experience of trauma as childhood already. So when we do experience trauma, it goes down this pathway that's like 12 lanes wide, going 300 miles an hour and slams into our long-term memory because that pathway's already been developed a little bit. So yeah, it's a topic I'm really quite interested in. And I believe they did a research study on California firefighters and kind of had them all do an ACE score. And I'm trying to find that paperwork to find the exact, before I quote it, I want to make sure that I have the facts right. But I suspect, or I believe that those scores are pretty high, higher than average, I believe.
Yeah. While there's more work to be done in this area, which we encourage anybody to take on during your postgraduate training, I suspect you're correct. It has been my experience as well, giving that examination, that my first responders have extremely high ACE scores, and that this is a contributing factor. To the first responder who thinks their life or career is over, and that they aren't sure what to do next, they're doubting themselves. They're doubting treatment, which I say it takes 3 to 5 clinicians to lock into the one that is right for you. Mm-hmm. What messages do you have for the struggling first responder?
That's a really good question. And I think it's so difficult for us because our careers and what we do is our identity. Like I am a paramedic, I am a firefighter. So when we think about doing something else, then it's like, well, you're telling me to be something else. And I think that's why it's so difficult for many of us. It was for me. And part of my treatment and part of my recovery is to separate my identity from who I am. It's like, no, I am a paramedic firefighter is my job. That's not who I am. And once I had that realization and kind of had that cemented in my mind, that it was easier for me to move on to my next career. And it's really difficult for a lot of people. And one of those fatal 10 for suicide risks are nearing retirement. What are we going to do? What am I going to do after this? This is all I know. And there are some organizations that are out there. I know there's one in Australia, and then there's another one in Canada, which help people transition their careers. And often they are transitioning involuntarily, where they're forced from their career or their identity, essentially. Like in my case, where my psychologist said, no, Dan, you're not going back on the ambulance. And, I was ready to go off the ambulance, so I didn't really resist it too much. But, the idea of somebody staying in a position that is causing so much trauma to the point where they potentially are going to take their own lives versus going through the work to become, a basket weaver or electrician or a therapist, whatever it is. Yes, I acknowledge that is a very, very, very tough position to be in. It's a very difficult transition. And I think that's an area that a lot of people need more support in. And it's an area that I'm really going to try to focus on when I open up my practice, is really help people, because we have a lot of unique skill sets. Like this organization in Australia, again, they focus mostly on law enforcement, but they're spreading out to other emergency services. Retiring law enforcement people have a skill set that is very desirable by large corporations as far as risk mitigation and risk factors for their organizations, where they can hire a retired police officer, and the officers can let them know what the risks are or where their vulnerabilities are on a personal safety level. And even I think I could do that even now when I go, and I'm not a police officer, but when I go into a building, I'm always looking for, because I'm hypervigilant, not as much as I used to, but where are my escape routes? What are the dangerous parts? How is my safety at risk in this environment? And that's a valuable skill to have, I think. And some organizations are recognizing that. And these police officers in Australia that are transitioning are getting paid way more than they were as officers, and they're valued by the organization, and they feel they have a new sense of purpose, a new sense of value. So it's a wonderful thing service that this organization is doing for these officers. And I'm hoping that more of that type of work is going to happen here.
I think,
people.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the 5 to 0 program. I might be incorrect, but you bring up an important point. Those transitional years and the suicidal risk of our members within their first couple of years after leaving work as a first responder does go up. We say thank you. We give you a radio call sign off. If you're a firefighter, I joke, we give you an axe and then we hope you don't use it. And that's it. The next day, you're a civilian. That's wonderful. So programs that do this, by the way, if there's any instructors in the programs that Daniel's speaking on, we're looking to add faculty in that area to help first responder members transition and to do that transition process wisely and with good care and support. One last question I have for you, a couple, and I will let you go. What is forest bathing? What is that about?
Oh, forest bathing. I love that. So that is I don't know the Japanese word for it, but it's a Shinrin-ruku, I think. Totally butchered it, I'm sure. But so in Japan, they have this therapeutic model called forest bathing. And because there's, the structure there is so, their work ethic is so hardcore there. And, this very city, there's a lot of buildings. There's not a lot of, compared to Canada, I'm comparing it to, the beautiful country I'm from. There's not a lot of forest areas in Japan. That's comparison. So forest bathing is essentially, it's like eco-therapy where people will go and they just spend time in the forest, which will help them appreciate nature. And two, it removes them from that constant pressure to perform in the business world that they're in. And it's an effective modality for them. And so for me, and I've been forest bathing for a long time. And you don't do that. You don't have to do it naked, by the way. You can do it with your clothes on. But I take my bulldog Dexter. He's a bulldog, so he can't walk as far as I can. He'll walk for 1 mile and then not even like half a mile and just sit there and stare at me. So I actually have a dog cart that I put him in, and we go for a walk through the forest near my house. And we do a 5, 6, 10K walk through the forest. And it's very therapeutic for me, just getting into that environment. So I do a lot of forest bathing, and that's what it's called. It's just spending time in nature, really. Forest bathing specific to the forest, but ecotherapy is a wonderful modality.
Good. And I'm very glad that you clarified that clothing is, optional, certainly.
Yeah.
But hopefully preferred.
Some places it's required, but
hopefully in many.
Maybe that could be a new therapeutic class we could do we can buy a little tract of forest and be like, okay, are you going to go out on your own? You're going to do naked forest bathing.
Oh, no.
But don't worry, won't. I don't know. That's people probably do it already. I'm sure they do.
I'm sure they do as well.
I'm sure it's already a thing.
Good. If people want to go ahead and book you to come in and do your keynote, or they want you to do your resiliency course, what are some of the ways we want to go ahead and get a hold of you, sir?
Yeah, so you can go on my website. There's a contact me link up there, or there's any public speaking under the events tab on my webpage that has a little bit more about what I offer and my exhibit. And you can contact me through that, or my email is just daniel@dansunphotos.com. You can contact me there. And I'm pretty busy with that. I'll be at EMS World next week. I'll be in North Carolina, and then I'll be in Australia in April, and I'll be in Maine. So I travel quite a bit, which I love. I'm so happy when I do that. I get to meet my peers and talk to them about, what's it like for them in their area, for their resources that they have, and how they feel supported or not supported. And so, I get a lot of feedback from the community on how it is around the world, really. So I love doing that type of work. So if anyone wants me, that can come. I have a large format exhibit. I have 13 pieces that I travel with that are 10 by 12 feet. They're life size, sometimes bigger than life size, that you can see the artwork that way. And then I'll do my presentation on post-traumatic growth or resiliency workshop that I have. And I love doing that kind of work.
Good. Daniel, you've been very gracious with us and giving us your time today. Your insights and your growth is inspiring. You're the very definition of post-traumatic growth. And we could not appreciate you more. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do everything I can. We start filming season 2 of Enroute, and I'm going to do everything I can to bring you back and get you on schedule for another episode. So
yes, I'd love that. Let's do one on post-traumatic sanctuary trauma. Let's do one on sanctuary trauma.
I think we should.
And and sanctuary trauma and post-traumatic growth are closely linked, actually. So we could probably put that into one episode. I'd love that. I would love to do that. And thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you. Take care, and we'll be seeing you soon on the road at events. And we appreciate you joining us today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Joseph.
I'm Joseph Brigandi. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Enroute. Enroute is a production of the First Responder Behavioral Health Institute. To learn more about us, head on over to FRBHI.com.